Soul Train, changing the landscape of television as we know it when it debuted back in 1971.
The infamous scene that led to Soul Train being taken off the air forever has been a divisive pop culture topic since 2006, and the truth behind this moment will leave you speechless. Soul Train was the cinematic heartbeat of everything black, from the afro to the music and the goofy dance moves. However, that heartbeat faded in 2006 without warning. Why did the show that ruled pop culture for decades vanish without a trace? Did this really happen because of a sensitive scene? Join us as we discuss the scene that led to the cancellation of Soul Train. A painful finish to a perfect rhythm. Soul Train was the perfect rhythm for black folks. It came with the afro, the energy, and the black vibe that spread like a house on fire whenever the show came on. However, age came into play, and Don Cornelius grew gracefully. The time had finally come to let go of the afro, the big goggles, and the classy three-piece suit. Following 22 seasons of setting up one of the greatest black franchises in the world, he chose to take a step back from the big stage at the age of 56. Although black famously doesn't crack, 22 years of energetic walking and moving around the stage, while he emphatically introduced artists by name and profession, surely took a lot of legwork. And rest surely came calling at the fancy age of 56. Although he had stepped back from the big stage, he enjoyed his old age as the master puppeteer, playing a creative force of the show from behind the scenes. The times have changed, and the old man knew it too. He recognized quickly that a part of black excellence was knowing when to step down and let the new black generations take over the world, their legacy, and mold it to suit the generation that comes after. Celebrity hosts were the new catch. So, in 1997, the show brought on Mistro Clark, an American entertainer who was the second permanent American host of the syndicated version of Soul Train until 1999. There was a clear change in his style. He had the fashion idea on lock. He was smart, could think on his feet, but he was on Don Cornelius. Although he got the job done, there was that small ick, which he respected, but suggested he would have preferred otherwise. The old man had retired, but he was a micromanager who was on set for every show. According to Mistro, he had to okay everything, from cue cards to camera shots. So he was very much still a presence. While Myro did not mind having it for the first 5 episodes, at least until he got the hang of it, to him, it did not seem like he could let it go. And he was there every day, trying to make him into the new Don Cornelius. As expected, he left the show, and then Shamar Moore took over as the permanent host in 2000 until 2003, when Doreen Gregory took over. Dorian was the last surviving soldier who served faithfully until the show was canceled. Dorian was having a fantastic ride as the host, so the cancellation was difficult for fans and the black community as a whole to accept. But why did they really cancel the show and take it off air? The Last Dance: Why Soul Train Crashed. In the cutthroat world of show business, creativity and control have always been held by the one entity with the most incredible power. And when it comes down to Soul Train, that one powerful entity is Don Cornelius.
Don Cornelius created the long-running TV dance show Soul Train in 1970. That program showcased then.
This wasn't just his show, it was his baby, a project he had nurtured and raised for too long. And he was only comfortable if he had full control, which he thought he did. When he had full control, there were scenes from the show, including performances and interview clips that he kept away for some reason best known to him. He kept them away from online video sites like YouTube owing to copyright infringement claims. He loved to hoard certain parts of the shows for reasons that no one quite understood. However, before he died, he figured out that some of the scenes he had considered sensitive and had protected all his life as part of his personal archive had been distributed through the sale of third-party VHS or DVD compilations. He frowned on the idea and felt that he had been backed into a corner and forced to go against his principles. It's like someone robbing your stash. While some believe his reasons are valid, others link the series' cancellation to a more serious problem. The show had run its course for well over 3 decades, enjoyed success, showcased black excellence, and perfectly set the stage for the new age for the black race. However, time always chisels the memory of the old away while sculpting new ones. Fans of the franchise had suddenly had new interests, especially in other black entertainment television shows, including BET. Nielsen ratings dropped to way below 1, and most of the stations that aired the Soul Train franchise, including Fox television affiliates or other independent stations, which had their own broadcast slot, rescheduled the program into an overnight slot. It's an unspoken rule in television to always have the best shows on at lunchtime or midday, and Soul Train's middays were well beyond over. Although memories of that black animated locomotive with multicolored smoke coming out of its smokestack and steam coming out of its sides passing through a city remain a pleasant memory of the franchise, they are still dampened by the death of the great visionary, who died from a self-inflicted shot to the temple on February 1st, 2012.
And dance show Soul Train is dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police said Don Cornelius.
He was taken to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead at the age of 75. His parting line on the show finally seemed like the classic note to self. And you can bet your last money it's all going to be a stone gas, honey. I'm Don Cornelius, and as always in parting, we wish you love, peace, and soul. But just before the crash, Soul Train had problems, specifically being forced into rivalries by industry leaders like Dick Clark. How did Don Cornelius navigate the situation? Rivalry behind the scenes. Soul Train shot a crazy amount of adrenaline into black culture, and it raged throughout its 35-year run on air.
And it ran until 2006. The Soul Train Music Awards, currently still taking place every year.
However, in the nascent stages of the show, it bore a rather uncanny resemblance to another type of music show that was already airing before his, American Bandstand. The show aired for about 30 years and was hosted by the famous presenter Dick Clark. Although the show had been on television since the early 50s and ended in 1989, it had taken a stand in pop culture, meaning that its strengths and flaws were always discussed. However, one of its greatest and heavily discussed flaws was its struggle with inclusion and diversity, with shallow representation of cultural nuances beyond the predominant all-white theme. Fans, and even critics, had begun to draw a parallel in the 70s between both shows, with one just about slyly representing other cultures, like For a Bit where they easily can be seen and equally forgotten, and the other, which is just unapologetically devoted to a specific racial nuance with reckless abandon. Soul Train. Soul Train was an unapologetically black-themed show, and Don Cornelius did not care much about the noise that serenaded his program. Although he discussed Dick Clark's show as one of the inspirations that lit that fire in his belly and had him crazy about getting Soul Train on television, he immediately shot down the idea that the show would be the same. Inclusion and diversity would have been counterintuitive to what he had spent all of his life building. Hence, the decision to create a space that did not include black people, black culture, and black expression to be subject to dilution and control to please the white mainstream audience. While conversation continued and the rivalry in the 70s threatened the empire, and haven he had built for black folk, he was not going to let it break him or his project. Other than competition, it was a contrast to him. He had built a disillusioned black Mecca, and he was not going to let anyone pervert its true identity with these edifying talks about inclusion and diversity. The show had aired over 1,000 episodes, rich in culture, style, and fashion, making the weekends feel like a showcase of culture that had been rubbished, perverted, or neglected on mainstream television for a long time, trumping every other entertainment show at the time. However, the rivalry with Dick Clark's past show, which had been squashed and spat out by Don Cornelius, immediately came back with a heavy resurgence in 1973. However, it was different this time. It was set up nearly the same way as the Soul Train. Black people, black entertainers, a combined audience, and the same goofy vibe and energy that propelled Soul Train. But that did not sit well with Don or the black community. How easily did this show spiral into a cultural tension? Don Cornelius and Soul Unlimited. Soul Train immediately started thriving since it was created in the early 70s, and despite external push and pressure from the usual culprits, they never changed their style or lost sight of what reality was for a black person trying to get into the entertainment industry before the blissful advent of Soul Train.
I'm just not into criticizing other black people. I think that's the most sinful thing a black person can do.
Success, they say, has many friends, but that wasn't the same for the Soul Train franchise. At least, so it seemed. Soul Train's success sparked jealousy among black folk who were taking 70s television by storm. It had never been done before. Watching someone tapping so elegantly into the endless pool of black talents and basically shoving them down everyone's throat until their talents make them a very easy pill to swallow. The pattern was simple: platform, visibility, and longevity. Dick Clark and the ABC network had watched on forlornly, hopelessly waiting for a time when Soul Train was ever derailed, and somehow got themselves an inroad into the franchise as the next best thing. However, the franchise only grew bigger and better, making the market a much tougher place to enter. Don Cornelius already had the world eating out of his palm, and he, plus his team of black superheroes, seemed to have all the answers to what successful show business looked like. However, it was not long before Dick Clark and the ABC network came up with a show that matched Soul Train, which they named Soul Unlimited. For Don Cornelius, it was looking into a mirror. Someone had actually taken a brush to canvas and painted his replica and planted it on live television like it was just another Tuesday. And he had the choice to let it go or fight tooth and nail. Simply, and he picked the latter. Dick was the perfect television host and businessman who knew the exact appeal to the audience of choice. Hence, the reason he had Buster Jones, an African-American television presenter and voice actor, hosting the show and perfectly creating divisive competition in the black community. It was the divide and conquer strategy, and if he were successful, he would have both franchises competing without having to be a physical part of it, working as a silent partner with a front row seat to a mutually destructive rivalry. But the black community saw through the hustle, knowing that they were being played like a fiddle against each other. This led to Soul Unlimited losing its lifeline and dying before it even started. After 12 months of unrelenting pressure from black stalwarts like Jesse Jackson and Clarence Avant, who argued that Soul Unlimited was another white man's strategy to co-opt and commercialize the black community's haven without compensation, the show died a natural death after its short 12-month span and created a heated rivalry between the two showbiz giants, Dick and Don. However, they figured it out and worked on other shows together, even after the slight, showing the camaraderie in show business. But how important was this bit of rivalry for the growth of the Soul Train franchise? The Soul Train takes off. Following the Soul Train's success and promotion to global syndication, Don Cornelius also gained improved status, with the show suddenly rebranding from being just a television program to a complete iconic movement in popular culture. The Soul Train was powered by the Black Engine of Expression, which was rewarded with awards that suddenly gained prominence from the continuous success that their time on television was giving them. These awards sent a serious message to the rest of the world about black entertainers. They were just too cool to be kept away from the spotlights. Soul Train was here to stay, and it not only created a room for Don Cornelius' growth, but the syndication immediately created a sense of improvement and visibility to black folks who wanted to be seen but did not have a platform to create this visibility. For some context, the band Earth, Wind and Fire, with popular songs like September and Let's Groove, rose through what seemed like an impossible period to break out of the loop of stagnancy that they had faced all their career, when they had a chance to get their groove on Don Cornelius's widely syndicated Soul Train.
And now, here's your host, Don Cornelius.
However, one of the show's greatest strengths was its attribution of power to the black females, as opposed to the regular media feeds about the oppression and suppression of the black woman. The show gave a perfect representation of confidence and clarity in the black girl child's capability, with women like Chaka Khan at the very helm of that movement. In its 35 years of syndication, the show, which had started like it was somewhat designed for purely soul musicians, evolved into an all-encompassing, expressive time capsule for nearly all forms of black expression, which included some elements of spoken words, funk, hip-hop, and dancing. Speaking of dancers, Rosie Perez, Shabba-Doo, also known as Adolfo Quinones, Patricia Butterfly Davis, Crystal McCreary, and Myron Montgomery formed the core of the greatest dancers to ever grace the Silhouette stage of Soul Train. The stage had a specially divided cut where dancers stood right across from each other, expressing their moves in the middle of that blissful accord and sending viewers at home into a frenzy. These moves made it to the ballrooms and the white people's parties, establishing the strength and the reach of Soul Train. Later versions of the show also had pop culture monsters like Jeffrey Daniel, the man who taught Michael Jackson the moonwalk, and other phenomena like Mary J. Blige and LL Cool J, who had some of the best moments on the 3-decade-old show. But in an industry where it was only normal to shut out the black talent and black culture, how did the meteoric rise of Soul Train raise the flags of African American entertainment? The rise of African American television entertainers. While Jim Crow was long gone in the 1970s, the systemic ostracization of the black culture was still in the works. Hence, the serious difficulty of getting that many black soul singers on television. At the time, only a very specific set of black people were invited on television musicals with a little cameo to solidify the faux inclusion theory that swept over early 70s television like a flood. Don Cornelius was wise to their ways, so he created the Soul Train and made it exclusively black. It was not just some scheme to have his roadshow take over American television. It was a cultural push to give the black entertainers and the black culture a nudge into a race.
I think Soul Train had a way of bonding the community. That was one time that you knew that all the black America was at home watching TV.
Where they were already left behind and had serious ground to cover. By 1970, when he had the first edition of Soul Train on television, he had set Chicago, Illinois, alight with the electric performances that came with it. That heavy bass line that gave everyone a cultural nostalgia and had every black 70s kid on their feet. dancing and applauding, celebrating seeing a type of music they could relate with on a cultural and emotional level. Although he had finally made it to television, that was only a quarter of the battle already won. He needed to find a way to keep it interesting and have traffic on the network every weekday afternoon, with people dying to see what they come up with every day of the week. As expected, he had already had Chicago in a chokehold by the end of the first month of consistent airing. He had some serious talents on display in the first episodes, including Jerry Butler, the Chi-Lites, and the Emotions, all three of which were top-class performers at the time and kept Chicago glued to its television every weekday afternoon. This wasn't a show. It was negritude on display. It was like watching a Black is Beautiful campaign with amazing voices and performers who knew the first thing about music, dancing, and entertainment. It was the purest art of blackness at the time, as there was not even a shot at all for the inculcation of another race on that set. You were either black or you were going back. The show reached unprecedented peaks, broke records, and steered America far away from the gang violence and substance misuse that had often been associated with the black race and clouded everyone's vision about them, and instead gave them a look at the repertoire of creativity that the race possessed. Having stayed the course of entertainment and stayed true to their roots for a whole year, keeping the Chicago crowd on their feet, black and white television had found its new star program. But even with all the troubles that plagued this, how much of a legacy did it leave on black entertainment and pop culture? Soul Train's lasting legacy on black entertainment. Talking about a connective thread that kept black culture together since the early 70s, no one did it better than Don Cornelius's Soul Train. While an end to the syndication might stop other shows from having that overarching influence on the next generation, Soul Train was different. Its influence on recent black entertainment cannot be understated, especially the fashion show, which celebrates expression, dancing, signifying confidence, and, of course, the music. However, in 1980, just 10 years after Soul Train was released, it raised new black soldiers for the soul of the African American entertainment enterprise, hence the formation of the Black Entertainment Television, popularly called BET. BET immediately sought the creation of African American television content and had black-oriented shows, which included music, comedy, and all genres of entertainment on their network, and they syndicated it all across the United States. This kind of in-your-face revolution, to have black entertainment spreading like a rash, all stemmed right from Don Cornelius's Black Power movement, which was fleshed out by Soul Train. BET celebrated blackness with award nights hosted by an eccentric host, capturing the same old flair Soul Train brought. However, the end of the show in 2006 had the black community screaming for a way to preserve the memories of this legendary enterprise, and BET once again came to the rescue. In 2009, BET Network decided to outrightly purchase all 1,100 episodes of the Soul Train, amassing the largest black music library that had ever been put together in the history of black television. Owning Soul Train's rights and intellectual property, which was not particularly easy to pry off Don Cornelius's grasp, meant that BET could build on the standing legacy and even old practices of the show. This conviction led to the recreation of the original Soul Train Awards, bringing back a gush of memories to the older generation and introducing the younger generation to the style, energy, and vibe that transformed the black entertainment space between the late 60s and mid-thousands. Although BET creates the most singular awareness of the Soul Train franchise in recent times, others, including Questlove, drummer for the hip-hop band The Roots, made it their life's work to make sure that the American people, black or white, Never forget how much of a rabble-rouser the Don Cornelius and Soul Train combo was. Could Don Cornelius have handled it better than just an outright cancellation of the show? How much of black success in Hollywood and entertainment can really be credited to this show? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and to subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.